We're here with John Guandolo. We're at the Eagle Council. He just gave a talk about some of what's going on with Islam as it relates to national security. He is the president of Understanding the Threat and used to work for the FBI. John, thank you very much for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about what you see vis-a-vis Islam and the threat to American national security. What's the whole picture there?
First of all, since 9/11, the U.S. government has not identified any threat that perpetrated the 9/11 attacks or identified the enemy that we went to war with in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. We kept identifying groups. First it was Al-Qaeda, and then apparently they evaporated off the planet because then it was ISIS, and now it's, pick the group. But this is not about the group. We see that the Islamic State or ISIS, the Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, fill in the blank, Muslim Brotherhood, they all say we do what we do because it's a command from Allah to establish an Islamic State under Sharia, and the means to do that is called jihad. And when you actually do an analysis, a professional analysis, and you look at what authoritatively published Islamic law says, and you look at what is being taught in U.S. Islamic schools, there are a number of reports, including one done, over 10 years ago by the former CIA director, Jim Woolsey. But our analysis, I have looked through dozens and dozens of school books that are used not only here in North America and Europe, etc., and they all say the same thing, that there are three duties in Islam, that one of them is jihad, that it is a requirement to impose Sharia on the earth because it's Allah's divine law. And if we don't understand that the reason that the Boston Marathon bombers did what they did, the Fort Hood jihadi did what he did, the 9/11 hijackers did what they did, the guys just in the last few months that have killed, whether they're killing their daughters or their daughters' boyfriends or these things, Muslim fathers doing these things or brothers, they're not doing it because it's a cultural thing or because it's a religious issue. They're doing it because it's a law that is required of them to follow. And when you read the law and you understand it, then it changes how we understand the entire threat. That's the first big piece. The second huge piece that I can explain in 10 seconds is when we can look at who the U.S. government in the major components, CIA, FBI, DHS, national security staffs, secretaries of state, defense secretaries, have used to advise them since 9/11 on how to deal with the threat, they're Muslims. And specifically, they're Muslim Brotherhood leaders. So the very people telling us how to fight the war have been giving us information that's exactly the opposite of what Muslims teach Muslim children in U.S. Islamic schools. Hence the problem.
Yeah. So I'm curious about an interesting angle here, and I don't know how much time you've spent thinking about this, but we found out from the former head of Romanian intelligence that they had sent thousands of Soviet agents into the Islamic world to kind of inflame them all against the United States. We also had President Trump saying that Obama had created ISIS, that he was the founder of ISIS. To what extent is this radicalism that we see in Islam inherent to the religion and what's written in their holy book, and to what extent is it outside influences like, say, Soviet agents or like Sunni Islamic dictatorships in the Gulf going in there and funding the most radical, the most extreme elements, and even going back to Afghanistan, supporting the Mujahideen against the Soviet Union. To what extent is it endemic, and to what extent is it outside influence playing a role in this danger?
Okay, that's a really good question. And so let me break it down for a couple pieces. First, there is one Sharia. There's one, because Allah's divine law is Sharia. And a Muslim is one who submits to Islam. To submit to Islam is to submit to Allah's divine law. And so there's one Quran. There's one way to understand it, because the Quran says what comes chronologically last overrules what comes before it, and the last command regarding jihad in the Quran is war against non-Muslims is a permanent command until the entire world is under Sharia law, Allah's divine law. but the law comes from the Quran and the example of Muhammad, their perfect man. The Quran says he's an exalted standard of conduct for all Muslims for all times. So he also said, I've been commanded to wage war until they testify there's no God but Allah. And he tortured, he beheaded people, he ordered people killed for the variety of crimes under Sharia, crucifixion. All these things are lawful in Islam, not only because they're in the Quran, but because he did them, and he's the perfect example. So he married a six-year-old, consummated the relationship when she was 9. These things are there forever lawful. To suggest that something Muhammad did was wrong is a capital crime in Islam. So terms like extreme and radical, they're only radical in that what ISIS and Al-Qaeda are doing are radically correct. So
radically correct. Okay.
It's radically correct. In other words, now you heard me say in my presentation that understanding the threat offers that if you can demonstrate something we teach about, for instance, Sharia, what it is, what its authority is, what it says, we'll stop teaching it and give whoever brings it to our attention $1,000 cash. 4 years of offering it, including, by the way, emailing Muslim Brotherhood leaders in the United States, myself personally, saying, hey, here's the offer. Big talker. You go on TV and bash me and bash my organization. Show me where we're wrong. Show me some Islamic law that doesn't say that. Of course they can't. The reality is this is what Islam is. ISIS, Islamic State, Al-Qaeda have never been wrong when they've quoted Islamic law, Sharia, in furtherance of what they've done. Now,
so are you saying Islam is not a religion of peace?
Well, technically, according to Islam, when the entire world is under Sharia, then you have peace, okay. True peace. Mm-hmm. So you could argue that it is the religion of peace, but the word peace is defined very differently in Islam than here. Now, here's an important point to your question, because people will say, well, now wait a minute, there are periods of history when Islam didn't do these things, and I would argue that's not necessarily true, but let's put that on the shelf for a second. Islamic law requires jihad to be waged when the Muslim community has the resources and the ability to do it. So in the modern era, really after the late 1600s, after they were defeated at the gates of Vienna in 1683, September 11th and September 12th, by the way, 1683. And I say that because we just had the anniversary of September 11th. That wasn't an accidental date. For a number of years, there was not obviously in the 1700s, U.S. leaders, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, had to deal with Muslims seizing U.S. ships and capturing our citizens. And the first war after the American Revolution was the Thomas Jefferson sending the Marines into Tripoli. And we defeated them. Since those two kind of events, there was not a lot going on in the jihad. There were battles, but not like we had seen in the previous 1,000 years. Well, in 1930, Saudi Arabia discovers oil. By 1950, Trans-Arabian pipeline is put in from Saudi Arabia out to the coast of Lebanon. And all of a sudden, those countries start having lots of money. Immediately, what do? Start building Islamic schools. They start teaching the Muslim community their requirements. That is pretty concurrent with the establishment of the Muslim Brotherhood in 1928 in Egypt. And so you start having this reemergence. And what do we see in the 60s and 70s? Terrorist attacks, hijackings, generals and CIA employees being captured, killed. You see the development of Al-Qaeda with Saudi money, a ton of Saudi money. You see the proliferation into the United States in the late 50s, early 60s of the Muslim Brotherhood. You see all this stuff growing because now they have the resources to do it. That is a very important part of understanding the timing, but it doesn't change that what we've seen is core Islamic doctrine, and they're just doing what they're commanded to do.
So, interesting stuff. And just a moment ago, you were talking about the Muslim Jesus, and I found this really fascinating because I hear even some Christians say that Christians and Muslims worship the same God. Tell us a little bit about this Muslim Jesus, and what are some of the differences? I guess there are some similarities between the Muslim Jesus and the Christian one. What are the big differences, and what are some of the similarities?
Okay, so the understanding in Islam is that Islam has always existed, and that when Moses came, that the law of Moses explained what was going on, and that Muhammad would be the final prophet. But Islam teaches that the Jews were dirty and treacherous, and they've corrupted what Allah gave to Moses, that we call the law of Moses. So what we have in the Old Testament that represents the Pentateuch, what's captured in the Torah, is not at all the same as what Allah gave to Moses. But that those who followed the law of Moses were going to be okay. Those who didn't, once the law of Moses came, were going to be cast into hell. And then Jesus came along with the evangel, as they call it, or the Injil, and those who followed Jesus were good. Those who did not were lost. Except, of course, he's a Muslim prophet, like Adam and Noah and Abraham, and Moses or whoever. They're all Muslim prophets. So what Islam teaches is that Allah gave Jesus the truth, and the dirty Christian priests corrupted that. So then Muhammad came with the final message. And so that continuum is their understanding that Islam has always been there, and their contention is that there is no original Old Testament or New Testament that's correct, because it's not what Allah gave them. So literally what Islam teaches is all the historical data, the original manuscripts of the Old and New Testament, especially the New Testament, the Dead Sea Scrolls, all the archaeological support for what's in what we know as the Old and New Testament. You have to take all that and just throw it out the window, because Islam says so. So that's the first part. The second part is, I'm going to answer your next two pieces very quickly. Is it the same God? Well, Allah says that when the Muslim prophet Jesus returns, he's going to slaughter all the Jews and destroy the church, break the cross, and cast all Christians into hell for not converting to Islam. So and this is not from a theological perspective. From a philosophical, can an apple ever be an orange and an orange ever be an apple? Of course, the answer is no. So can that God who's going to do that be the same God who said, Jesus, I am the truth, the way, and the life. Nobody gets through to the Father except through me. And the Father said, this is my Son in whom I'm well pleased. Can those two things be the same? That's the question people have to ask. And the answer philosophically, not theologically, is simply no. Those are not the same gods. And there are many more examples of that you could just line out. The understanding of Jesus, I just made clear, but they do teach in the Quran that Jesus is the son of Mary, she was a virgin, it's a miraculous birth, and that he did miracles. And that he's to be revered, but he's not a God. The Quran teaches that Allah has no partners, that those who believe in the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, are blasphemers and should be killed. Directly contradicts the understanding of the teachings of Jesus from the beginning. So the two Jesuses can't be the same, and therefore can an apple be an orange be? If Jesus is two different people just with the same name, then the God of the Old and New Testament can't be the God of Islam.
So one last question. From a national security perspective, from a policy perspective, what do you think the U.S. government ought to be doing to address this issue?
Well, like any threat, you have to conduct professional analysis, which has not been done since 9/11/2001, which is 18 years. No professional analysis. We've done it, Understanding the Threat's done it. I did it when I was an FBI agent, and I built the first training program in the government on it, which was widely hailed at the time in 2006. Quickly became very unpopular to talk the way we were talking then. And here's why. Professional analysis from a military standpoint goes like this. You address a threat based on who the threat says they are and why they say they're fighting. Since 9/11, we haven't done that. 100% of these jihadis, these threats, whether it's ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Boston Marathon bomber, again, the Fort Hood shooter, the guy in Chattanooga who killed the 4 Marines and the Navy sailor. Pick an incident in the last 18 years and before 9/11 that were Islamic jihad. They say, I'm a Muslim, we're Muslims, waging jihad, war against non-Muslims in order to establish an Islamic state under sharia. That's what they say. And the reality is that's where we're supposed to begin our analysis. If we had done that on 9/11, we would have just said, oh, they say sharia is their doctrine. So you open up a book of Islamic law, like this one, and this book not only has the imprimatur of Al-Azhar, the highest authority in Sunni Islamic law, the Muslim Brotherhood says this is good doctrine. It is widely available at mosque bookstores all over the United States and at major Islamic conferences in the United States. And this book, according to Islamic leaders in the United States, should be in every Muslim home in America. And when you open this book and it says that jihad is warfare against non-Muslims, it's obligatory, that it is okay for a parent to kill their child or grandchild for any reason, no indemnity for doing it, that those who leave Islam have to be killed, and on, and that lying to non-Muslims is obligatory if the goal is obligatory, and advancing Islam is obligatory. And once you understand these things and you analyze that, and if we had done what we did with the Soviet threat and said, okay, now we're going to take Sharia and we're going to teach it in our war colleges, at our service academies, to the FBI, CIA, and then when we eventually created DHS, well, we would be in a very different place. And if 10% of pastors in America had decided, hey, maybe we should show some courage and speak truth about Islam, we wouldn't be where we are today. But none of that's happened. That's what we do. We're the only organization in America educating, training individuals, citizens, police, National Guard, military, elected officials, and giving them strategies to deal with this, giving them the tools to actually deal with this at the local, state, and federal level.
And where can people find this, John? You got a website?
We do, understandingthethreat.com. And if people do just one thing, I would say go to the website and sign up for our newsletter, because that immediately connects you in, because our newsletters will have the links to our radio show, our TV show, our YouTube channel, and all the other ways that we distribute information on this. The website's got access not only to our books, our DVDs, our streaming videos, all that, but we also have a ton of free resources that are there for people just to walk through and learn about the threat.
Fantastic. John, thank you so much.
Thanks very much for having me and letting me share this.
Absolutely. Thank you.